Other students wrote they didn't take that text lightly. She later in the chat wrote, quote, "I wrote a dumb joke that should not have been made. I wrote a dumb joke that should not have been made. I wrote a dumb joke that should not have been made." In a WhatsApp group chat of about 215 students, where students were discussing an event that was to take place Friday at the Ocean Bank Convocation Center on campus to make their capstone presentations. An FIU police officer read some of the statements in court.
The exact words utilized was, "There's going to be a bomb in the Ocean Bank Convocation Center, and it's going to be at Jonathan's fault," one of the members in the chat.
7 News obtaining some bits of that chat. It seemed the student wanted the event rescheduled and wrote, quote, "Netanyahu, if you can hear me, drop some bonbons for us capstone students in Ocean Bank Convention Center." Other students wrote they didn't take that text lightly. She later in the chat wrote, quote, "I wrote a dumb joke that should not have been made."
I can understand your position, Ms. Corey, and you're saying this is a joke, but to an objective person, it's not a joke, and there would be enough for probable cause. I'm not saying it's enough for beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know what the state's going to be able to prove at trial, but for purposes of this hearing, I believe there is enough for probable cause.
Among the bills that are up for consideration are those that would make anti-Semitism a hate crime.
Now, one would adopt the International Holocaust Alliance definition of anti-Semitism and trigger penalties under the state's hate crimes law. But it's already getting pushback. And Fox 5's Christopher King is live at the state capitol with the details on this. Christopher.
Russ, Courtney, supporters say this particular bill would define clearly what anti-Semitism is. They say right now there is no definition of anti-Semitism in Georgia code, but opponents say this particular measure could interfere with First Amendment rights. Georgia lawmakers head back to work next week. Among the big issues they'll debate this legislative session, proposals on anti-Semitism.
Our bill would define the term anti-Semitism.
State Representative Esther Panich last year introduced a bill that uses the International Holocaust Alliance definition. Anti-Semitism is hatred toward Jewish people, rhetorical and physical acts against Jewish people, their property, community institutions, and religious facilities.
It would be punished as a hate crime.
Panich, the only Jewish member of the General Assembly, says her bill would place anti-Semitism under the state's existing hate crime law. She says right now there is no definition in the Georgia Code stating what anti-Semitism is.
It defines what it is because right now there's no definition.
This proposal misses the mark on its intention.
Critics like State Representative Ruwa Roman say the Panich bill would do little to fight anti-Semitism. Roman calls the language in that legislation too vague.
The bill doesn't actually have the definition in it.
Here at 5, celebration at the state capitol today from a coalition of Christian and Jewish supporters of Israel. Today, the Georgia House and Senate passed a bill adding anti-Semitism language to the state's hate crimes law. The bill stalled in the Senate for much of last year. 11 Alive's Doug Richards is live at the Capitol where the bill's passage dominated the proceedings today. Doug.
Sure enough, and repeatedly backers of this bill said that it would merely add a hate crime penalty to any other type of crime that's charged and has found to have had the motivation of anti-Semitism. So with that explanation, it was a relatively easy sell for members of both political parties. There were more than 100 people queued up for seats in the Senate gallery in anticipation of the vote on HB 30, the anti-Semitism bill that had stalled in the Senate since last year.
The Jewish community has a moment of heightened anxiety because of the increase of anti-Semitism in the United States and around the world.
Backers of the bill said increased incidents targeting Georgia's Jewish communities justify broadening the state's hate crimes bill, with specific language to include anti-Semitism. Democrat Gloria Butler says the Jewish community deserved her yes vote.
And in every moment, black people or women asked for equality. The Jewish community stood hand in hand with us.
But critics fretted that the bill would chill legitimate speech criticizing the state of Israel.
Within the hour, the House voted overwhelmingly to pass a measure targeting anti-Semitism on campus. CBS 2's Tony Aiello spoke with two local sponsors of the bipartisan bill.
We need to be able to define anti-Semitism.
The bill, sponsored by Republican Mike Lawler and Democrat Josh Gottheimer, does just that. Their Anti-Semitism Awareness Act directs the U.S. Department of Education to use the definition developed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance when enforcing federal anti-discrimination laws. Quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews.
Are you familiar with Genesis 12:3?
Probably not as well as you are, Congressman.
Well, it's pretty clear. It was the covenant that God made with Abraham. And that covenant was real clear. If you bless Israel, I will bless you. If you curse Israel, I will curse you. And then in the New Testament, it was confirmed that all nations would be blessed through you. So you do not know about that.
I have heard that. Now that you've explained it, yes, I have heard that before.
It's now familiar. Do you consider that a serious issue? I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible? I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible?
I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God?
Here's the deal. We fail the mission, you die.
If we find out any information you give us is false, you die.
If we find out you have personalized license plates, you die.
What? No.
If you mismatch blacks, you die.
No.
If you cough without covering your mouth.
Harley, those last three aren't things.
I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible?
Definitely not.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Let me bring your attention to Muhammad Abdu, who was hired after the October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. He, on October 11th, posted, "Yes, I'm with Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad." He also decried false reports accusing Arabs and Muslims of decapitating the heads of children and being rapists. We know that there were decapitations of babies.
There is a roadblock between us peers because it seems that we are far apart of actually what happened October 7th. And I know there's a lot of people here came and talk about what happened October 7th. I would like to have a chance to tell you what, from my point of view, what me and my people think. And
Go
you
on,
can,
tell me what you think happened.
So there are three big things that made the world accept what is happening now in Palestine. And they talk like, what will happen now? What can we get it? Three things. The story of what they decapitated babies.
That was not true. That was not true. That was not true.
The story of what they decapitated babies.
That was not true.
Good. So why didn't the Western media refute it? Why didn't they?
Well, it was refuted very quickly.
Really?
Yes.
But
very quickly.
How many times the Western media has used that media? Until today, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is still repeating it. Until now, Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's not true.
I know, but it was.
But it has been discounted by the media.
No, not really.
It has.
Not really. And it didn't. And in the discounting and refuting, and I think when you have an apology or a retraction, it has to be.
Yeah, but I was accused of saying it. I never said it. I was accused of saying it. I never said it.
I was accused of saying it. I never said it.
And you know what is similar? Is when you spread the lies of 40 decapitated babies, although it was refuted. So what happens when people hear that, killing babies is horrible. But when you say decapitated 40 babies, you are planting a certain image
well, with a certain
trigger in people's mind.
Who has said that? Who has said 40?
Who has said that? Who has said 40 decapitated?
Who has said that?
You have repeated.
No, I haven't.
What?
I've never said that.
You haven't said on your show 40 decapitated babies?
Never. We can't ignore this extraordinarily sad, horrible story that's come out of Israel. What do you make of this?
Well, it's barbaric. I mean, it's one of the... I can't think of anything that has upset me more other than 9/11. And I don't really want to talk about it too much because I get upset. So if you want me to be crying during your show, go ahead.
No, I tell you, I myself choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded.
40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever... Anyway.
But it was...
But it has been discounted by the media.
No, not really.
It has.
Not really. Not really. Not really. And it didn't, and in the discounting and refuting, and I think when you have an apology or a retraction, it has to be...
Yeah, but I was accused of saying it. I never said it.
You said...
No, I didn't say it.
You said, it came to me as a revelation that I read about 40 murder babies, some of them are decapitated.
Yeah, maybe in that, yeah.
You said
Which
that.
were early reports.
With Joan Collins.
Yeah.
Right?
Which were early reports.
I understand.
Which turned out not to be true.
Durham, North Carolina has become the first American city to actually ban its police force from any kind of training with either the Israeli Police Department or the IDF. The motion was passed unanimously by the city council, despite outcry from local Jewish groups, after gaining nearly 1,400 signatures from the Durham population. Activist groups, including the Jewish Voice for Peace, united under the banner Demilitarize from Durham to Palestine to rally support for the proposal. While critics say the ban is anti-Semitic because it singles out Israel, the council's decision called out the militarized style of Israeli army and police tactics, accusing those tactics of harming both Palestinians and Jews of color. The statement specifies that the, quote, tactics of extrajudicial killing, excessive force, racial profiling, and repression of social justice movements, end quote, used by Israeli forces would only help the police terrorize black and brown communities here in the U.S. While police departments across the U.S. have indeed come under intense scrutiny lately for alleged racism and abuse of power.
All right, let's talk about censorship. Right now, they're wanting to censor anti-Semitism. Last time, it was anti-vax. Next time, who knows what it's going to be. But the State Department held an anti-Semitism symposium for the social media companies, Google, X, Meta, TikTok. They all showed up to discuss what actions could be taken to defeat anti-Semitism online. You know where this might head. It's going to head towards a lot of censorship, a lot of targeting, a lot of removing of accounts, just like what we saw during COVID. This time it's just a different topic. And maybe this is a topic you agree. Maybe you feel like, yeah, this online hate, this anti-Semitism, it's bad. It's got to stop. We got to censor it. Maybe you feel that way about this particular topic, but once you okay it and green light it for one topic, they do it for another. Luckily, when it came to COVID, what we've already seen is during COVID, they did a lot of censoring. We saw this with the Twitter files. We saw this with the Facebook files that were exposed, that there was a lot of government targeting of certain accounts, and they ended up taking those accounts down or removing their tweets or blacklisting them somehow or shadow banning them in other ways, right? We saw that with COVID, and that has resulted in a lawsuit against the federal government. Now, with anti-Semitism, they might, the one thing that we might have on our side is since the exposure from the Twitter files, they might be a little bit more hesitant to categorize certain speech so quickly to go after it and say, yes, this is anti-Semitism. If you say from the river to the sea, Palestinians should be free or Palestine should be free.
For 30 years, I am very consistent, and I'm saying something very simple. This conflict is not on the lack of a state of Palestinian, but the existence of a state, the Jewish state. Every area that we evacuate, we receive terrible terror against that. It happened in South Lebanon, in Gaza, and also Judea and Samaria, which we did it. And therefore, I clarify that in any other arrangement, in the future, the State of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea.
Did the president address Netanyahu's use of the phrase "from the river to the sea"?
in their conversation today? I know the White House has previously said that phrase is divisive, so.
I'm not aware that that specific phrase was discussed.
Do you condemn him using that phrase?
Look, there's a connotation with that phrase. We've talked about this before. But when you use the phrase "river to the sea," it speaks basically to the mantra of Hamas and in their manifesto, where they basically describe the geographic bounds of what they believe to be Palestine. And if you look at it on the map, if you go look at the four corners that they describe it, it's basically the state of Israel. They just don't believe it should exist. So again, it's not a phrase that that we recommend using, given because of that context.
But this wasn't Hamas. This was Netanyahu.
I understand. I don't have anything more on that, and I certainly don't have anything more on the conversation to read out with respect to that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that, because I think that is the break. If we're not speaking the same language, where can we go, right? So there's a man, a blessed memory man named Lord Jonathan Sachs. He was the chief rabbi of England. He had a great line. He really defined anti-Semitism. That anti-Semitism is Jews have no right to exist collectively as Jews with the same rights as other human beings. Which is kind of a weird statement. So let's just track back to understand the history of anti-Semitism. 2,000 years ago, Jews don't accept Jesus as Messiah. For people who do not have faith, as the early Christians, as some of them have faith, some of them accept Jesus, but they don't really in their heart. And you and I both know people like Rob McCoy who accepts it fully in their heart, and other people who are doing it without faith. And those who have less faith, the fact that a Jew exists, let alone thrives, is a threat to their faith, because how can the Jew not accept Jesus as God and still thrive? Unless he's associated with the devil. So you start having these myths that are created of the Jew being identified with the opposite of God. This really codifies in 1144 in Norwich, England, what's called the Blood Libel. This is really important to understand, especially today in 2024. In 1144, a young boy is killed, and the local priest says that's because the Jews need to make their matzah with Christian blood. It's called the Blood Libel. It's blame the problems of other people on the Jew. It's just so you know, that's so ridiculous, not only just on its face, but we're forbidden from even having meat that has any blood in it. This is a Torah law. You can't have, that's why, we can't have steak tartare, okay? So this gets perpetuated in combination with a 4th century, what's called the Vulgate.
I'm sorry, did you say in 1140 this happened?
1144 in Norwich, England.
Okay.
This is after, in the 4th century, you have something called the Vulgate. The Vulgate is the official translation of the Bible. In Hebrew, there's no vowels. And the person who translates, St. Jerome, who translates the Vulgate, knows what he's doing is translating wrong. He puts down that when Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, he has horns, okay, Karen, when actually the word was Karan, meaning that light shone from his head. So now, by 1144, you have the anti-Semitic myth of Jews have horns and they drink blood. And I know people who've been asked when they went into the army and other places, can I see your horns? So this still exists today in 2024 throughout America. And I don't mean just in little rural areas. It exists today, these myths. That Vulgate Bible is the official Catholic Bible all the way through the 1970s. So you need to understand that that's a piece of it, okay? That they're equated with this kind of hate. Because it's about Jews not having the right to exist collectively, when they live in their little communities in the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism is a hate against their religion. By the time you get to the 18th and 20th centuries, when so many Jews have assimilated, they are in culture, they are in arts, they're in science, it's no longer against them for their religion, it's against them for their race. This anti-Semitism is the oldest hate in the world, and the hate that mutates.
But let me share with you the State Department document here. The Office of the Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism hosts Symposium on effective action to confront online anti-Semitism. I would love to know what they believe the effective action is. It's obviously censorship. I would like to know exactly which phrases they want to censor, who they want to censor, what types of sentiments they want to censor. Do they think that any and all criticism of Israel should be censored? Is that considered anti-Semitism? There's a big, wide window here of what is being called anti-Semitism these days. So I would love to know, get the reading of the minutes from this meeting to find out what they consider to be anti-Semitism. So it says, on May 23rd, U.S. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, hosted a symposium to combat online anti-Semitism. The symposium convened technology executives, NGOs, and government representatives to foster collaborative thinking about effective action against surging online anti-Semitism. Again, are they calling anything against Israel anti-Semitism? I'm going to guess that's a yes. The forum was an enriching and productive exchange of ideas across the three sectors. Participating technology companies included Google, Meta, Microsoft, TikTok, and X. So there you go. We could expect more censorship online on the social media companies. Maybe they learned a lesson after Missouri versus Biden, after the Facebook files. Maybe they'll be gun shy on censoring. One could hope. Special envoys for combating anti-Semitism from Canada and Israel took part in the symposium. So they invited the Israeli government to this so that the Israeli government could sit them down and tell them what anti-Semitism is. Anything that criticizes Israel. They also had the deputy chief mission for Germany. 6 NGOs, which Germany has taken the path of anything Israel wants, like anything Israel says, we're not going to even criticize it. And I understand why Germany takes that position. They just say whatever they want, let them do. You know what? We're the bad guys. We're not going to criticize. We're not going to say a word. 6 NGOs from around the world, including the American Jewish Committee, Anti-Defamation League, World Jewish Congress, Center for Countering Digital Hate, Cyberwell, and Decoding Anti-Semitism also participated. So they got a bunch of organizations. So they invited Israel, and then they invited a bunch of organizations who think anything and everything is anti-Semitism. The ADL, which is notorious for thinking that any Jewish person who calls up the ADL and complains that they didn't get a job because they believe because they were Jewish, or they weren't given a lunch break they believe because they were Jewish, they call that anti-Semitism without even investigating it.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.